I'm going to record something regarding my grandparents because it's something I would like for my great-grandchildren to know. My grandma was the first bride to come to Cortez, Sally Adams Fulford, and my grandpa was William Thomas Fulford. Grandma called him Will. Everybody else called him Captain Billy. And they lived in the big house next door to me. The piece of land where my house is now, my daddy and mama bought from Grandpa and Grandma in 1925, and they built the house in 26, so it's now 79 years old. Grandma and Grandpa had 9 children. All the children had been born before they moved to that big house. All the children had been raised in the big house at the corner of 45th and 123rd, where Sue Maddox lives now. That house, which is, everybody calls it Key West style, was first 1 story and then a 2nd story. And in 1905 or 6, and as I said, the children had been born, they moved into the big house. They had 9 children. Grandma had red hair, and I'm sure that's what attracted my grandpa. She was a very kind and quiet person. I love my grandmother very much. And the strange thing is that though I saw her about every day and spent a lot of time with her, I can't remember what her voice sounded like. We've got some pictures so I can remember what she looked like. But if whatever my grandmother did, I wanted to do it. She took cod liver oil, and I don't know if you've tasted cod liver oil, but I had to have cod liver oil. And one of the things, there was a powdered milk called Klim. I could see the can, blue and white metal can, K-L-I-M, and Grandma liked that. She drank that, and I wanted it too. And I credit that with the fact that today I drink powdered milk. I know you kids don't like it, and I mixed it with the milk when we moved to Tallahassee, because back when we were in the service, milk was 9 cents a quart at the BX, but we were paying more for that. But Grandma was a very quiet and lovely person. I'm sure she's the one who told us, you don't say you love food. You like food, you love people, and never say you hate anybody. And I appreciated that in her. She wore long dresses, and as Pauline, the oldest cousin, wrote in a letter to me, Grandma never showed her ankles. She had her hair pulled back. She was, in her last years, were very painful. She had cancer of the uterus, and she would always go to this one doctor and would not go to Dr. Blake. And I know my mother tried to get her to go to Dr. Blake, and by the time they did get her to Dr. Blake, the cancer was too far advanced for her to have surgery. So she was there at the house, the big house in Cortez, and she had to have morphine shots. So my mother was getting up every 3 hours and going over and giving her the morphine until Dr. Blake came down and he said, this has got to stop. Somebody else has to learn how. So Pauline learned how to give her the shots, and my grandmother died in 1936, and the funeral was something to behold. There were enough grandsons to be the pallbearers. We took her out to the Palmasola Cemetery, and I can see that hearse and the grandsons picking up her and carrying her to her grave site. And the flowers, so many. It took all of us granddaughters to take the flowers to the gravesite. But the one thing that I remember, the funeral was down in the Griffith and Klein Funeral Home, and I can remember seeing my grandfather standing there, 1936, looking at her. She was 66 years old, which would be the last time he would see her body, and before we took her on out to Palmasola. Well, as I said, my grandmother had lovely red hair. She had no red-headed children. I was the 16th grandchild and the first redhead. And my grandfather, this was a hot July day when I was born, July 1, but my grandfather walked over to see me. And what's remarkable about that is that he inherited the Fulford vascular disease. He had a bad leg that was very painful, and this was 1925. In 28 he would have that leg amputate it because it was so painful. He then had an artificial leg. There was a woman named Sadie Pierce that came to Cortez with her mother, and I went out to see Sadie when she was close to 90. She had worked for Grandma and Grandpa. Sadie's parents were her mother was very poor. I don't know why she came in there. They lived in a little shack, and I know Grandma used to send them things, but Sadie told me what she remembered about working for Grandma and Grandpa was that the first thing every morning she had to get him that black coffee that would be left over. She had to bring him some coffee, and she had to help him put that leg on because it wasn't something he could do by himself. Grandpa would sit in this big rocking chair in the living room of that house, and he had a cane with him, and he loved to play games with the kids. If you ran by, he'd try to catch you, so it became a game. My grandfather was very kind to us children, and he played with us, and there's some things that you won't believe, but one of the things, he taught me how to suck raw eggs. He liked raw eggs. Well, Mama had chickens, so he'd tell me to go out in the chicken coop and get some eggs, and I'd bring them, and he'd put a little hole in them, and we'd suck those raw eggs. Another thing he did with us kids, he liked conchs, and we'd get down on the shore and pick up these conchs, not the great big ones, those little black ones, and he would roast them for us and cut that meat out for us to eat. One thing that I remember about Grandpa, we had this net, Daddy had this net camped down on the shore, and it was pretty high. It was high enough for the boats to be put under. And so we were making mud pies down there one day. We had a bakery set up, and we were selling our mud pies. And Grandpa came by, and he bought mud pies for us. He gave us real money. Well, we closed our store, and we went to the store real quick to spend that money. My grandpa was part of the lesson that I learned on the value of telling the truth. Once he gave me money to go to the store for him, and when I came back, I didn't have all the change that I should have had. And he said, "Well, did you buy some candy with it?" And I said, "No, sir." And I'm sure that would have been all right with him, but I said, "No, I didn't." So he said, "Well, it would be all right if you did." Well, my mother didn't like that. And my mother walked from our house down to that store, and there wasn't a road. It would have been a path on what would really sand flat with some little mangroves growing along and some grass and maybe a rattlesnake or two, because we did have snakes in Cortez. She walked until she found that dime, and she brought back that dime and gave it to him. And that was a lesson I've never forgotten, because my mother never told a lie. In fact, I'll tell you another story about her. When she was 16, she went to a party. She married when she was 18, and she didn't have on any makeup, but the girl did, and the father of the girl said he just hated that makeup on young girls. He wished they wouldn't wear it. And my mother told him, "I'm never going to wear it." And she never did. She never wore lipstick or rouge. Now, our sister, Aunt Daisy, liked to do the rouge, and all of us kids, we were very happy when we got old enough to have a tube of Tangy lipstick. But, in fact, when Mama died, I said we better get up there quick and be sure they don't put any rouge and lipstick on her. And we didn't have any on her then either. My grandfather had been the most successful fisherman in Cortez. When the cousins came from North Carolina, they stayed at the big house with him. He taught a lot of people how to fish, and his son would succeed him as the most successful one in Cortez.